Hey, night voyagers! Before we shove off from the dock, run a quick checklist. Tap that like button so the lighthouse stays lit. Subscribe so you never miss another midnight sail. And drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and whether you dare sleep on a creaking ship painted with dragons. All set? Good. Dim the lights, crank up a little white noise surf, and let's drift back to a time when Europe's best cartographers genuinely believed a fish could swallow your cog like a breadcrumb and a polite prayer. Lean closer to the parchment. See that delicate illustration of a round-bellied whale beached on a sandbar? The tiny figures standing on its barnacled back are sailors roasting dinner over a fire. Medieval bestiaries recorded that whales lulled crews by posing as islands until the smoke irritated them. Then, whoosh, whole ship, whole campfire, whole crew slurped into the sea like bread into stew. Maps captured those stories not because they were proven, but because they were cautionary. They said, don't get cocky just because the water's calm. One stormy morning, waves slam the deck until every nail complains. Someone spots a shape carving circles beneath the foam, broad as a beer hall, darker than tar. Shouts rise. The captain unfurls his reference map, Benedetto style, Italian, expensive, rumored to be blessed by St. Christopher. And there, near the coordinates you occupy, an octopus with eyes like chapel windows is inked with the caption, Qui nascitur Kraken, here the Kraken is born. Suddenly, logic drowns in adrenaline. Was that swell just a freak wave, or was it 8 tentacles practicing their grip strength? The ship survives, but the story will outlive everyone aboard, because fear is viral and maps are its social media. Pause the simulation. Let's talk about why map makers lean so hard into monster culture. First, maps were prestige objects. A duke commissioning a world chart wanted flair. Throwing a monstrous bestiary onto blank water signaled erudition. Look how many travelers our court has funded. We even know about the fish that impersonates Portuguese beaches. Second, faith shaped worldview. Genesis gave humanity dominion over animals. But stories of Job reminded viewers that Leviathan shrugged off spears and laughed at panic. To medieval Christians, listing monsters wasn't superstitious fluff. It was theological fine print. God made this too. Handle with humility. The third reason? Economic deterrence. If you control a profitable trade route, you might quietly encourage cartographers to exaggerate dangers elsewhere. Why risk the Scandinavian coast if the Bay of Biscay is full of man-eating walruses? It's medieval marketing, sabotage by sea serpents. Merchants might outwardly dismiss the tales, but subconscious worries steer ships as firmly as wind. Meanwhile, in the Islamic Golden Age, scholars like Al-Idrisi drew comparatively elegant sea charts with fewer fanged mascots, largely because they had better astronomical data and a robust translation culture feeding them Greek, Persian, and Indian geography. European monks, by contrast, were working from Crusader hearsay, Norse sagas, and the odd Roman epitaph. When your data pipeline is rumor soup, mythical garnish feels inevitable. I want you to imagine one more workshop. Venice, 1459. The city hums like a kicked beehive. Paper shipments jostle with pepper sacks on the wharf. Inside a cartographer's studio draped in silk maps, a young apprentice named Sophia copies coastlines under the eye of her uncle, Master Niccolo. She isn't allowed to add monsters, that's his brand signature. But she accidentally splashes green pigment across a stretch of open sea. Niccolo peers at the stain, strokes his beard, and declares, "There must be algae dragons in that latitude." He paints over the blotch with scales and a forked tongue. The map sells for double because the buyer's wife squeals over the adorable sea lizard.
Ridiculous? Absolutely. Yet practical. Detailed knowledge of the Atlantic was patchy. Why not monetize mystery? Maps moved like luxury gossip, half information, half entertainment. Just as you binge true crime podcasts, a 15th century banker drooled over cartographic horror flicks.
All right, give your shoulders a roll. That candle smoke is thick tonight. If you're still awake, and I hope some of you insomniacs are blissfully nodding, remember to tickle that like button so the algorithm knows you're still breathing. Then drop your favorite sea monster emoji in the comments. Devil, octopus, squid? I read them all and occasionally cackle at 3 a.m. when I should be editing. Let's steer back to theology for a moment, because medieval Christians didn't separate physical geography from moral cartography. The edges of the earth doubled as edges of virtue. Take the Hereford Mappa Mundi, circa 1300. Jerusalem sits dead center like the heart of a compass, while on the outer rims you find dog-headed men, nomadic Amazons, and cannibalistic tribes. The further from the holy city, the weirder and more sinful the inhabitants. Sea monsters naturally roamed the remotest waves. In other words, monstrous waters warned you where piety thinned and hell gurgled under the keel. Even ship design echoed this mindset. Figureheads of saints, angels, or armored knights were bolted to prows as spiritual harpoons. If St. George speared dragons on land, maybe a cedar carving of him could scare off aquatic cousins. The logic is magical thinking, but it's also marketing. Freight insurers offered cheaper rates to vessels boasting blessed figureheads. Fear, faith, and finance tangled on every tide. Cue a story. In 1491, right before Columbus's splashy debut, Portuguese explorer João Fernandes Lavrador, yep, the dude Labrador is named after, supposedly encountered black islands that moved. His chroniclers describe them as oily-skinned, four-eyed whales bigger than castles. Historians suspect he saw either floating mats of volcanic pumice or maybe walrus colonies. But the map scribes of Lisbon drew hideous blubber dragons anyway. A century later, English privateers used that Portuguese map as proof that the Northwest Passage was guarded by fiends. Convenient because no one had the budget to verify. Notice how each retelling compounds dread. A sailor glimpses a dorsal fin at dusk. A storyteller upgrades it to a shark. A cleric with a moral agenda promotes it to a demon punishing lustful seafarers. A cartographer packages the demon in watercolor for dukes who love exclusive intel. Finally, a ship insurer jacks premiums on routes near Lust Punishment Bay. Everyone profits, except the terrified deckhands. You, by the way, would profit from a blanket right now. Pull it up, let the waves lap softly in your headphones. We've got miles to sail. Why were sea monsters almost always north, west, or south, but rarely smack between Italy and Spain? Because merchants there had eyes on the water daily. Familiarity is a natural disinfectant for myth. The Mediterranean was busy, measured, documented. But look toward the Norwegian Sea. Fewer hulls, rougher storms, and a pinch of Norse saga boasting. That's where map monsters thrived, sprouting extra heads each time someone's cargo vanished with no surviving witnesses. Another side quest. Let's decode some common beasts.
There's the Aspida chelone, island turtle, popularized by the 2nd century Physiologus and still lounging on 15th century portolains. Then the Zahnfisch, a German-speaking saw shark who allegedly helped sailors by towing them, a rare kind monster, unless they insulted him, in which case he shredded planks for fun. And of course, the Orkney kraken, likely a colossal squid magnified by shock and ale. But scholars also link kraken lore to medieval anxieties about the Black Death. Tentacles, infection, sudden catastrophe. Maps became therapy canvases. Draw the fear, maybe trap it on paper.
Meanwhile, Muslim cartographers recorded jinni-infested whirlpools and copper-vanishing mermaids because Quranic cosmology allowed for parallel spirit realms. Chinese naval manuals warned of mountainous fish in the South China Sea, but those fish rarely migrated into European maps, another reminder that monsters obeyed cultural shipping lanes. When Vasco da Gama circled the Cape, European artists borrowed African legends wholesale, sketching Ethiopian sea elephants that resembled hippos wearing chainmail. Think of it as content aggregation, 1500 style. I know what question you're itching to ask between yawns. Did any medieval sailor actually see a bona fide, big-budget sea monster? Probably not, at least not the fire-breathing, saint-swallowing kind. But they did witness whales breaching like living cliffs, oarfish rippling like silver spears, and storms that stitched lightning into the surf until night looked alive. When your worldview includes angels hidden in clouds and devils riding plague fleas, the leap from whale to apocalypse serpent isn't huge. Let's linger on one real creature that likely fed the legends, the basking shark. Up to 10 meters long, mouth agape like a cathedral door, surfacing in temperate Atlantic zones. Harmless filter feeder, but a medieval mariner seeing jaws wide enough to inhale an ox cart had no reference manual saying, "Relax, it only eats plankton." So a rumor sprouted. Some sharks don't bother biting, they gulp whole ships. Cartographers gilded that rumor with tusks because why not? Speaking of embellishment, the illumination style used for monsters borrowed from cathedral gargoyles, twisting bodies into moral metaphors. Scholars tracked the iconography. If a beast had lion paws, it symbolized pride. If goat horns, lust. If owl eyes, dark knowledge. Thus, maps weren't just travel guides, they were sin atlases. Reading one felt like rifling through God's field notes on humanity's weak spots. Sail west, confront greed. Sail north, face wrath. Sail east, meet envy disguised as jeweled dragons. Let me nudge you to interact again. Algorithms feast on these moments. If you had to personify your worst habit as a sea monster, what would it look like? Scribble your answer below. Mine would be a procrastinating octopus juggling 8 unfinished scripts. All right, horizon check. We're drawing close to the point where monsters start shrinking. Enter the Renaissance, printing presses, and improved navigation like the astrolabe. Sailors realized that plotting latitude with math beat guessing with gossip. As knowledge expanded, map margins lost wiggle room for fangs. By 1600, Dutch cartographers still sprinkled decorative dolphins over the oceans, but the captions downgraded from "Here be devils" to "Here be good fishing." Yet notice, they didn't erase monsters entirely. Human brains refuse pure emptiness. Even today, sonar blips under the Mariana Trench spark headlines about new giant squid footage. The tradition lives, just wrapped in HD documentary narration rather than monkish Latin. Before we furl the sails for tonight, lean once more over that scriptorium desk. The monk signs his map with a tiny cross and the words, Sit Deus propitius navigantibus. May God be favorable to those who sail. He doesn't know you'll read his work in a room lit by LED strips, but he hopes the warning creatures keep you humble. Somewhere in the vellum folds of history, humility was the true monster repellent. Take a long breath. Ink dries, candle gutters. We've drifted roughly 2,500 words through wave and myth, which means it's anchor drop time. If you're still conscious, slide a sleepy thumbs up, hit subscribe for the next leg, and share this voyage with a friend who'd pet sit a kraken. Let me know in the comments if you want us to hoist the canvas again and sail into part 2, because the story doesn't pause at dawn. Monsters evolve, maps mutate, and you, brave passenger, deserve front row seats to every ripple. Scoot your chair a hair closer to the screen, Night Voyager, and feel the parchment under your palms again. The candle's warmer tonight, and the ink smells sharper, like cedar and salt mixed together. Quick housekeeping before the tide lifts the keel. Tap that like button so our little galleon shows up on more sleepy playlists. Hitch your name to the subscriber roster so the algorithm doesn't throw you overboard. And drop a comment telling me which mythical beast you'd volunteer to feed during Midnight Watch. All set? Good. Swallow the hush of the room, because we're gliding into waters where cartography collides with capitalism, and the monsters are about to get contracts. Imagine you're standing in a print shop in Antwerp, 1524. Iron presses wheeze like asthmatic drummers. The master printer, Hendrik, rubs his ink-blackened thumbs together and slaps a fresh sheet onto the form. Metal type glints, Latin place names locked beside wood-carved sea dragons. Each pull of the lever births a new world. Crisp coastlines, cardinal roses, and a kraken so detailed you can count suction cups. Map-making has just married mass production, and suddenly anyone with a purse full of guilders can hang an ocean nightmare on the dining room wall. You help stack the prints to dry. One customer is a Portuguese spice broker headed for Lisbon. Another is a German pastor collecting sermon props. A third is an 11-year-old boy whose tutor swears geography builds character. None of them will ever sail farther than Flanders, yet they pay extra for editions dripping with monsters. Why? Because at supper they'll unroll the chart, point at a tusked dolphin the size of Scotland, and watch guests gasp. Cartographic horror has become parlor entertainment. Pause the scene and zoom out. Gutenberg's press, barely 70 years old, has turned rumors into replicable assets. A single sailor's fever dream, once confined to tavern lore, can now be typeset, multiplied, and shipped across Europe in a fortnight. The result? Monster inflation. One honest whale report spawns 5 engravings, 10 pamphlet stories, and 30 second-hand swellings until the creature's dorsal fin grazes the moon. Knowledge spreads, but so does exaggeration, like ink bleeding through thin paper. Let's trail one particular rumor, the bishop fish of the Baltic. Story goes that Polish fishermen hauled up a humanoid fish wearing what looked like a mitre. It gestured piously, begged release through silent gestures, and when taken to the King of Poland, scribbled a plea in Latin. "Set me free, and I'll pray for you." They did. It bowed 3 times and vanished.
The account reached Rome, then Nuremberg, then London, each retelling adding flourishes, webbed fingers, silver scales, sermonizing underwater choirs. By the time Hendrik's engraver sketches it, the bishopfish sports coral rosary beads and an angry scowl. He plops it into the North Sea next to Aberdeen with a caption, Episcopus Marinus, who curses impious sailors. Boom! Another monster on the payroll.
Meanwhile, real sailors are inching farther west. Enter Giovanni Verrazzano, 1524, busy year. He hugs the Atlantic seaboard of the still nameless future United States and writes to King Francis I about a new land full of good harbors and no dragons yet. Key word, yet. Because cartographers back home read that absence of monsters as suspicious opportunity. Within months, speculative maps of Terra Nova include serpents curling through Chesapeake inlets. When queried, the map makers shrug. If no one's charted it, anything's possible. Uncertainty is their favorite currency. Step aboard one of the explorers' caravels. Cramped decks, tar-stung nostrils, rats playing tag near barley sacks. The helmsman nails a fresh woodcut map to a bulkhead. It features cod shoals off Newfoundland, nice, and a leviathan rimming the Sargasso Sea, less nice. But he values both equally. Cod could fund a house, leviathans keep the greenhorns respectful of protocol. Superstition doubles as discipline. Nobody slacks on night watch if they think missing a sail reef could summon a tentacle. Now flick over to the study of Gerardus Mercator, 1569. He's perfecting the projection that will steer ships for centuries. Straight lines, right angles, fewer decorative Baroque blobs. Mercator's rational grid signals adulthood for cartography. Monsters start feeling childish. But he's no killjoy. On earlier regional charts, he still sprinkles narwhals and sea apes, labeling them with tiny paragraphs of eyewitness gossip. His secret? He treats monsters as footnotes, not focal points. The balance begins to tilt from here be who knows what to here be bearings and magnetic variation, plus maybe a merman, but don't quote me. While mathematicians domesticate the oceans with latitude and longitude, artists rebel. In Prague, a printmaker named Philip Gall releases a coffee table atlas where nearly every available tide pool sports a trident-wielding fish knight. Buyers adore it because it scratches both itches. The head wants data, the heart wants drama. Consider it the 16th century equivalent of toggling between satellite view and fantasy overlay on your GPS. All this stokes competition among European powers. If Spain's charts brag about slaying dragons off Cuba, England counters with pamphlets claiming their captains drunk punched a sea wolf near Newfoundland. National pride inflates like bellows. The result? Monstrous arms race. More teeth, more horns, more cautionary verses etched in Gothic script. And each iteration spurs insurance brokers in Antwerp to recalculate transatlantic risk, raising premiums again. Monsters, whether real or not, are stimulating the economy. Let's zoom into an insurance office, 1581. Oak desk, quill scratches, abacus clicks. A broker assesses a cargo manifest. Sugar, tobacco, indigo. He consults a wall map riddled with beasties. Every serpent icon inside the vessel's planned corridor dings a surcharge. But there's a loophole. Captains can petition to lower premiums by presenting credible navigational logs disproving monster sightings. Suddenly, rational observation has monetary incentive. Sailors who once embellished storms into kraken attacks now downplay actual whales as large dolphins to win cheaper coverage. The cultural pendulum swings. Skepticism rises. Monster margins shrink. Still, fear finds new mediums. Enter stage left, the broadsheet woodcut. Sailors returning to London's docks spin yarns about fish with cow heads. A local printer cranks out single-page illustrations selling for pennies. Literacy is climbing. Even cobblers can afford a lurid sheet to pin above the hearth. Children memorize the creatures, dream of them, draw them in dirt alleys. Monstrosity trickles down the class ladder. Democratized dread. You're getting sleepy? Good. Drift with me to 1607, to a tavern near Bristol. Sea captains gather over ale, swapping intel. One reveals a Dutch map showing a coast of Virginia suspiciously monster-free. Another presents a Spanish version bristling with serpents. They bicker, propaganda or truth? Finally, they agree on a rule. Trust your own eyes, but keep an ear to rumor. Thus, maps become layered authorities. Official lines plus folk annotations scribbled in margins. Beware sudden fog, phantom lights, shoal shaped like crocodile. Midnight nears. Tap that like button if the crackle of the tavern fire soothed you. And hey, comment which 16th century port you'd haunt as a time-traveling tourist. Delphic Delphi? Saucy Seville? I'm partial to Lisbon because custard tarts soften monster trauma. Returning to our timeline, science sharpens its knives. Naturalists like Ulisse Aldrovandi publish herb and beast encyclopedias with chapters on whales, complete with skeleton diagrams. They still record mermaids, but as unverified hearsay pushed to appendices. Visual hierarchy changes. Anatomical realism netted bigger reputational gains than shock value. In other words, you could brag louder at scholarly banquets if you sketched a cutaway of a seal than if you painted a three-headed eel. Prestige is migrating from myth to measurement. Yet the public isn't ready to surrender its nightmares. Enter the theater. London's Globe stages Shakespeare's The Tempest in 1611, featuring sea change, corpses turning into pearls, spirits dancing over waves. The audience, fresh off broadsheets of monstrous fish, laps it up. Stagecraft becomes safe harbor for the beasts exiled from elite maps. They survive through metaphor, poetry, and eventually novels like Moby Dick. Cartography evicts them, storytelling shelters them. Monsters don't die, they diversify portfolios. Now stand on the deck of the Dutch East India flagship Batavia in 1629. You're the ship's surgeon, tasked with keeping sailors alive until Java. You keep a logbook with latitude readings, scurvy notes, and weather sketches. In the margin, you doodle an octopus menacing a cherub, just to break monotony. After the ship wrecks on an Australian reef, survivors cling to that log as legal evidence during the mutiny trials. The judges chuckle at the doodle, clearly fictional, but the precise coordinates matter. A century earlier, the monster might have eclipsed the math. Now, the math eclipses the monster. Let's check in with the printing presses again, 1650s. Blue's grand atlases still ornament their cartouches with sea cherubs riding dolphins, but open sea panels are mostly blank. Why? Because blankness has become a brag. Our data is so good, we don't need filler. White space announces confidence in empiricism. Yet some buyers complain, maps look boring. Publishers reintroduce decoration as elaborate borders. Muscled mermen holding compasses at the corners, safely away from actual routes. Compromise achieved. Aesthetic thrill quarantined from navigational truth. By the late 17th century, the Royal Society in London mandates that expedition reports focus on measurable phenomena: coastline lengths, magnetic declination, lunar tables. But deep in annexes, captains still append curious occurrences: glowing wheels beneath hulls, songs heard over fog, giant shadows passing under moonlit swells. Scholars label them phosphorescence, acoustic refraction, whale pods. Yet libraries shelve those accounts because they tickle imaginations and funding boards. Monsters become case studies in human perception rather than zoology. And they slip inland. River charts of the Mississippi drawn by French trappers sport alligators wearing crown-like crests. African explorers sketch hippos as half horse, half fish. Once you learn the monster visual language, you can't unsee it. Every ripple suggests fangs. Even railroad maps in the 1800s borrow the iconography. Steam engines depicted as iron dragons racing across prairies. The lineage from monkish leviathan to industrial locomotive is a straight, smoke-belching line. Okay, time to flex those typing fingers one more time. If this voyage is still rocking you gently, hit subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's departure. Drop a wave emoji, phoo, if your eyelids are getting heavy, or a telescope, pooh, if you're wide-eyed and ready for the next chart. Before we anchor, let's tackle one last transformation: photography. In 1857, French astronomer François Ruder pioneers sea surface photography during Mediterranean expeditions. His plates come back monster-free, and the newspapers gleefully declare sea serpents proven myth. Yet within weeks, a hoax photo of a Pacific plesiosaur skeleton washes up, literally staged with whale bones, and sells thousands of copies. The format changes, but appetite remains. We still crave proof of terror. Fast forward to today, satellite maps rule. But notice the splashy clickbait headlines whenever Google Earth glitches. Giant crab spotted near Whitstable Pier. We zoom, pixel peep, debunk, repeat. Same dance, new platform. The medieval monk's ink blot is now a blurred satellite shadow. Our species still plays Rorschach with oceans. And that, fellow mariners, is roughly 2,500 words of map, monster, and marketing. Another candle burnt to a stub. If you'd like to weigh anchor for the next leg, where whaling ships harpoon both beasts and myths, and Victorian parlors bottle mermaids in glass, type "set sail" in the comments. Until then, keep your charts handy, your skepticism sharp, and your dreams sea monster friendly. I'll meet you on the next night tide. Scooch a little closer, cartographic dream diver, and feel the deck plank sway beneath your socks. The night air reeks of salt, hot pitch, and something older than latitude. Quick ritual for the algorithm gods before the sails billow. Click like so this sleepy sloop keeps drifting up recommended currents. Subscribe if you crave more midnight voyages. And scribble below which mythic sea beast you'd adopt as your emotional support monster. I read every comment while nursing my postscript caffeine crash, promise. Ready? Let's uncap the ink, unroll the vellum, and step past the edge of Mercator's polite grid into seas where monsters start fighting back. Picture a Danish tavern, 1733. Whale oil lanterns spit smoke, and the place smells like damp wool and cinnamon schnapps. At the back table sits Hans Agata Jr., missionary's son, part-time cartographer, and full-time hype machine.
He's sketching Greenland's coastline from memory, but he's also doodling something huge. A serpent breaching beside an iceberg, maw open, a church steeple lodged between its teeth. The patrons lean in, ordering more ale just to watch him shade the scales. Egeda has never actually seen the beast. He glimpsed a long, dark shadow once at twilight, and his mind did the rest. Yet by dawn his tavern doodle will be on a packet boat to Copenhagen, where engravers will trace it onto copper. In 6 months, Dorsum merchants will pin prints on counting house walls, certain that between Denmark and their next cargo of cod lurks a cathedral-eating dragon. Fear, still a fantastic business model.
But the Enlightenment is flexing. Across the North Sea, Royal Society fellows in powdered wigs sniff at such tavern tales. They crave data, sextant readings, barometer logs, specimens pickled in jars. Instead of scrimshaw krakens, they hang framed lithographs of dissected porpoise skulls, science chic. Yet even these rationalists find themselves captivated by a rumor that refuses to die. The Steller's sea ape, reported off Kamchatka in 1741. George Wilhelm Steller, a bona fide naturalist, described a creature with a bulldog head, human eyes, and fishy tail. His shipmates laughed, but his log got published anyway, because discrediting a monster still sells as many copies as worshipping one. Now drift with me to a Spanish courtroom in Cadiz, 1752. Insurance underwriters and admiralty judges pore over testimonies from the galleon Nuestra Señora de la Luz, wrecked near the Azores. The captain claims a colossal arm rose from black water and tore the rudder free. Sailors back him up, sworn on Bibles. But a young naval engineer named Jorge Juan y Santacilia, fresh from measuring Earth's meridian, dismisses it. He argues the damage matches a submerged reef's geometry, then sketches cross-sections of coral heads for the judges. The court sides with math, not myth. Precedent set. Official maritime law begins replacing monsters with mechanics. But quietly, the clerk copies the captain's lurid description into a personal notebook, because bedtime stories trump legal briefs when candles burn low. Skip east to Edo period Japan. Local artists craft Nagasaki prints for curious townsfolk eager to glimpse foreign wonders. Among Dutch galleons and cockatoos, they insert umibozu, shadowy monk shapes said to capsize ships if sailors speak. These prints sell out faster than rice pancakes. Japan's cartographers seldom scattered beasts on navigation charts. They favored clean coastlines. But their pop prints feed the same appetite Europe satisfies with map margins, a global craving for shaped darkness. Board an English whaler out of Nantucket, 1776. The first mate unfurls a battered chart. Blank white Atlantic, no dragons. The crew grumbles. Blankness feels eerie. So the cook, bored between meals, inks a playful kraken in an unused corner. Superstition returns overnight. The greenhorn harpooners start spitting thrice over the rail whenever fog rolls in to keep old Squidface asleep. An accidental sketch reacquires ancient authority. Absence of monsters, it seems, is almost as scary as their presence. Let's examine the economics. Whale oil lights Europe, but each voyage costs a king's ransom. Investors demand risk calculations. Enter Lloyd's Coffee House in London, center of 18th century marine insurance. Brokers there devour whaling logs the way you and I binge comment sections. They catalog where ships snagged icebergs, where scurvy thinned crews, where unidentifiable leviathans rammed hulls. Patterns emerge.
Monster sightings spike near Labrador currents, where fog distorts scale and narwhal tusks loom like pikes. Lloyd's actuaries quietly code fog plus narwhal zone instead of serpent grounds, and adjust premiums. Thus, monsters undergo an actuarial exorcism, converted into statistical noise. But outside the coffeehouse, pamphleteers sell true accounts of the ice serpent to wide-eyed apprentices for a halfpenny apiece. Dual economies, skeptical and sensational, thrive side by side.
Shift to Paris, 1802. At the National Institute, a young naturalist named Cuvier lectures that any large unknown vertebrate is unlikely in modern seas. Evolutionary niches are accounted for. He pronounces sea monsters philosophically impossible. Newspapers quote him, and map publishers start purging beasts from new editions. But timing is fickle. Only 2 years later, sailors off Portugal swear they chased a 100-foot reptile. British journals lampoon the French. Behold, Cuvier's impossibility sporting off Lisbon like a French dandy. National rivalry revives the monster meme again. Meanwhile, in Nordic waters, fishermen net a globster, half-rotted whale remains, and newspapers christen it a Nyctophanes colossus. An engraver imagines tentacles, reporters borrow phrases from Homer, and within weeks a new chimera stalks Scandinavian minds. Scientists eventually classify it as basking shark detritus, but the correction appears in small print. The monstrous debut had starred on page 1. Its mundane obituary hides on page 12. Attention spans obey spectacle, not footnotes. Pause. Deep breath. If you're still awake, lob an anchor emoji, anchor, in the chat so I know the lullaby is working. And if this parade of Enlightenment skeptics versus tavern fabulists tickles your historian heart, smash subscribe like you're harpooning a hypothetical hippocampus. We march forward. 1820, the whale ship Essex is rammed by a massive sperm whale. Yes, a real one, mid-Pacific. Survivors stagger into Valparaiso recounting the attack. Newspapers seize the angle. Leviathan strikes back. Suddenly, real whales adopt monstrous dimensions. Herman Melville, years later, will turn that attack into Moby Dick, a novel whose white whale behaves exactly like a medieval map dragon, enormous, vengeful, symbolic. Literature inherits the cartographic beast. Jump to Scotland, 1848. HMS Daedalus logs a 60-foot serpent with horse's mane. The Royal Navy can't dismiss its own officers, so the Admiralty convenes inquiries. Illustrations flood the Illustrated London News, a scaly vertebral arch gliding beside a frigate. Letters to the editor explode, some quoting scripture, others dabbling in proto-evolutionary speculation. The sea serpent becomes Victorian clickbait. Mapmakers largely ignore it, too modern for decorative Gothic style, but popular science mags cash in. Monsters migrate mediums yet again. Clock ticks. The age of steam whistles in. Transatlantic cables need precise seafloor charts. Telegraph engineers drop sounding lines every few miles, discovering mid-ocean ridges, but no dragons. Data points crowd blank areas reminiscent of the old here be nothing spaces. And as sonar appears in WWI, reflections reveal only schools of fish, thermal layers, submarines. Monstrous vacancy expands. Still, sailors keep one eye on periscope screens, hoping for a blip that isn't German steel. Myth lingers at the margins of technology. Now, cameo by cryptozoologists. 1934, the surgeon's photograph of Nessie's surfaces.
Though lock-based, Nessie's lineage tracks to sea serpents once inked off Orkney. What changes is scale from map to snapshot. What remains is our hunger for wonder. The picture ends up debunked decades later, but tourists still flood Inverness because debunking rarely empties gift shops. Let's pivot to cultural anthropology. Pacific Islanders long carved Taniwa, guardian water monsters, into meeting house posts. European missionaries labeled them heathen dragons, but sailors quietly borrowed Taniwa tales to flesh out blank quadrants of South Seas charts. Some captains even added cautionary text in log margins. Natives warn of reef-dwelling god, avoid night anchorage. Ethnography and superstition cross-pollinate. Map icons become miniature negotiations between colonizers and local cosmologies. Meanwhile, in the Arctic, Inuit narratives speak of Kalupiluit, child-snatching sea beings. Hudson Bay Company traders jot them in diaries, partly to scare green recruits away from thin ice. These diaries reach London, where children's author Charles Kingsley reads them and folds elements into The Water Babies. Monsters thus trickle from indigenous oral lore to Victorian nursery shelf, skipping charts entirely, but shading future imaginings of northern seas. Are your eyelids half-masked yet? Perfect. While you teeter on the edge of dreams, let me stitch one final tapestry. Modern deep-sea exploration. Alvin dives, satellite altimetry, abyssal rovers. Monsters replaced by hydrothermal worm colonies. Yet each discovery headlines like a Lovecraft draft. Gigantic tube worms thrive in boiling darkness. We still brand new fauna with hyperbole because the commercial rules of Hendrix Print Shop never died. Only the fonts changed. And digital cartography? When Google Earth glitches, pixel tears, algorithm stitching errors, forums teem with kraken-spotted threads, echoing monkish marginalia. Augmented reality games even seed intentional sea monsters for players to chase, virtual cartouches on GPS layers, interactive medievalism. Slide a candle closer, Wander Watcher, and settle back against the bulkhead. Night's grown thick enough to taste, a stew of tar, brine, and damp hemp rope. Before we crack open another brittle atlas page, whisper a quick offering to the algorithm. Tap like so this rusty galleon of sleepy history keeps floating into new harbors. Jab subscribe so you're first on deck when fresh tides roll in. And scribble in the logbook below. If you had to name a newly discovered ocean trench, what mood-setting title would you choose? Personally, I vote Abyss of Unsent Emails. Lanterns lit? Excellent! Let's heave the hatch and climb down, past tidy coastlines, into the curling ink where cartographers' quills trembled at every wave. Imagine Lübeck, Hanseatic League hub, winter of 1482. The Trave River is sealed with brittle ice, but inside the scriptorium of printer Lucas Brandis, sweat beads on apprentices' brows. They're coaxing a massive woodcut through the press, an ambitious mappa mundi for merchant captains flushed with Baltic coin. Carved into the North Atlantic's blank gulfs are two marvels. A whale so large sailors mistake its barnacled back for an island, and a snarling beast labeled Xiphias, half swordfish, half wolf, allegedly fond of gnawing hulls. Why include creatures Brandis has never witnessed? Because wealthy captains want bragging rights. They'll unfurl these charts in taverns, jab tankards at the monsters, and claim, I sailed right past that hellfish and lived. Map as macho resume. Now pan south to Venetian Arsenal, same century.
Galley captains hunting new spice routes stroll workshops stacked with cordage, cannon, and, curiously, fresh printed portolan charts. Angular coastlines studded with compass roses and rum lines. Portolans boast few monsters. Their buyers value precision over drama. Yet in the lower margins, the engraver sneaks a cameo, a tiny mer-horse prancing near Cyprus, tossed in for tradition. Even here, where merchants demand scientific accuracy, a scrap of myth clings like sea salt on brass. Let's shadow those merchant fleets across the Mediterranean until we dock at Alexandria. There, inside Mamluk marketplaces, Syrian paper merchants hawk Arabic nautical manuals, bahriyat, dotted with stylized fish, jinn, and swirling calligraphic warnings, "Beware the mother of storms." Islamic cartographers rarely sketched literal monsters. Instead, they wove protective talismans into geometric borders. Supernatural threat recoded as sacred text. The same anxiety, different visual dialect. Swing west to Lisbon, 1494. Prince Joan's spies intercept news that Genoese interlopers plan an Atlantic push. Portuguese cartographers huddle over secret Padrón Real master charts, state secrets. On these clandestine sheets, sea monsters are conspicuously absent. Fear of espionage outweighs fear of krakens. Any decorative flourish could tip rivals to hidden shoals or favorable currents. Here, absence of monsters itself becomes a defense mechanism. The smoother the map, the harder to reverse engineer. But decorative creatures aren't dead. They've migrated to public propaganda. King Juan commissions painter Duarte Pacheco to illuminate a parade banner showing a royal caravel slicing through dragon-churned seas. Message: the crown's explorers don't just cross oceans, they subdue chaos itself. Monsters turn into marketing assets, roaring on silk while vanishing from classified parchments. Two parallel cartographies, one for glory, one for guidance. Pause for a mid-voyage stretch. If you're drifting toward dreamland, drop a wave emoji in the chat so I know which crew members succumbed to the lull. Everyone still upright? Good. Let's push further. 1513. Ottoman Admiral cartographer Piri Reis compiles his famous world map. Scholars obsess over his depiction of the Americas, but equally telling are the critters. He copies a Chinese sea dragon from a Ming atlas, an Indian makara from Sanskrit lore, and European sirens gleaned off imported Catalan charts. Piri's monsters are cosmopolitan, proof that cartographic fear is fully globalized by the Renaissance. Silk Road meets Spice Route meets Sea Monster fanfic. Skip ahead to Antwerp, 1570. Abraham Ortelius publishes the Theatrum Orbis Terrarum, sometimes dubbed the first modern atlas. Ortelius loves clean lines, but his engraver, Franz Hogenberg, sneaks elegant cetaceans breaching near Iceland. Sales skyrocket. Courtiers adore decorative beasts. Competing mapmaker Gerardus Mercator, eager to appear rational, strips animals from most plates, then on a 1595 Arctic inset quietly inks in a pair of walrus dragons. Can't resist the merch slot. Even father of modern projection bows to audience appetite. Now board an English privateer bound for the Barbary Coast, 1601. Quartermaster Jasper Moore carries a pocket atlas by John Dee, edges stained with rum. In the blank South Atlantic quadrant, he sketches a personal monster each voyage, adjusting horns based on gossip from captured sailors.
The crew treats the evolving doodle like a weather oracle. When the beast grows larger, they expect storms. Self-fulfilling psychology. Fear shapes perception. Perception shapes journal entries. Entries feed next year's cartographic rumor mill. Across the channel, meanwhile, the London company prints broadsheets of Virginia. They swap dragons for Algonquian fauna, opossums, flying squirrels, exotic yet verifiable to woo settlers. Investors prefer creatures you can skin and sell. Sea monsters recede, land critters rise, but the emotional formula, fear spiced with wonder, remains unchanged. Let's examine technological tug-of-war. Copperplate engraving allows finer coastlines, but also permits intricate leviathans. Increasing precision doesn't exile monsters, it sharpens their scales. A 1630 Dutch chart of the Sundestrait shows rum lines precise to quarter degree, yet cushions them with a kraken devouring an entire junk. Engineers and fabulists share the same burin. The printing press democratizes terror. Earlier, monks painted a single Draco per vellum. Now, presses churn hundreds. Sea monster inflation kicks in. Armchair explorers in Augsburg, Toulouse, or York can pin identical nightmares above fireplaces. This standardization breeds strange comfort. Your fear is mass-produced, hence communal. Monsters become part of a shared European bedtime, public property like saints or seasonal plagues. Fast forward to 1663. Robert Boyle's air pump experiments shift intellectual fashion toward empiricism. Royal Society fellows label monster maps childish, but provincial schoolmasters still hang them in classrooms. They teach moral lessons. Stray from God's path and you'll meet Charybdis. The Enlightenment's glow reaches capitals first. Rural minds keep their dragons on a slow fade. Across the Atlantic, Puritan colonists scanned the New England coast with Matthias Quad's 1608 chart. Lacking monsters, they supply their own via sermons. Satan lurking in fog banks, whales as Jonah's punishing vessel. When real cod runs explode, ministers credit Providence for taming old leviathans into edible bounty. Monstrous threat downgraded into protein source. Let's run a quick blood pressure check on our timeline. Why do monsters retreat? 3 pressures: improved instrumentation, economic demand for reliable shipping, and Protestant suspicion of popish imagery. By 1700, English publishers largely omit beasts to show rational virtue. Yet, ironically, the very century that banished krakens from charts birthed Gothic novels stuffed with watery phantoms. The monster migrates again, from cartography to fiction. Cue William Blake's 1795 etching of the Great Red Dragon and the woman clothed with the sun. Though biblical, its sinuous body borrows posture from earlier sea serpent woodcuts. Art inherits what maps discard. Hold on, comment check. If you're still listening, type Inkblood below, and maybe share which era's map art you'd frame above your desk. Helps me calibrate future voyages. We can't leave without spotlighting indigenous reinterpretations. 18th century Maori mapping traditions carve peka peka, winged sea beings, onto waka prows, encoding navigational data as mythic carvings rather than parchment. When British officers label these decorative, they miss that each curl indicates current direction, safe harbors, knowledge nested inside creature silhouettes. For Maori seafarers, the monster never was a threat. It was a mnemonic compass. Likewise, Polynesian stick charts weave coconut ribs indicating swells. Shell nodes mark islands. The whole lattice looks like a skeletal sea spider. European collectors hang them as primitive art, unaware they depict a living ocean's pulse more accurately than any European chart of the era. Sometimes what looks like a monster skeleton is actually a precise hydrographic graph. Back to Europe, 1836, Edinburgh. Geologist Charles Lyell lectures on uniformitarianism. Slow, observable processes sculpt Earth, no cataclysms necessary. His slide projection of a fossilized mosasaur skeleton triggers gasps. Society that scorned map monsters suddenly thrills to prehistoric dragons authenticated by rock strata. The kraken is dead. Long live the plesiosaur. Victorians pivot hard. Natural History Museum halls fill with reconstructed marine reptiles. Newspapers tout sea dragons of yore, safe because extinct. Cartographers still print sterile admiralty charts, but family parlors now host lithographs of ichthyosaurs. Fear becomes nostalgic, sanitized by paleontology. Jump ahead to 1912. Titanic sinks. Inquiry boards pore over North Atlantic ice charts. No monsters, just berg symbols. Yet survivors recall the berg as a white, looming animal. Artists illustrate magazine covers portraying the ice as fanged. Catastrophe remonstrifies nature even without kraken silhouettes. World War II. Sonar operators aboard destroyers misinterpret deep scattering layers of fish as enemy subs. They nickname them ghost wolves. Classified Allied charts annotate regions with code biologic. Official monster euphemism returns in wartime lingo. Electronic age. 1977, NOOA research vessel Discoverer picks up a bizarre sound, bloop, in South Pacific hydrophones. Media speculates giant beast. 2005, NOOA says iceberg fracture. Myth pops, fades, but threads persist in creepypasta forums. Digital cartography's white spaces shrink daily, yet any glitch births a new Leviathan overnight on Reddit. Our brains still crave dorsal fins slicing unknown water. We've roamed from Brandis's printing press to broadband conspiracies, one unbroken wake of human hope, hype, and hydrophobia. Monsters prove less about zoology than psychology. They map the shifting border between known and felt. The wind hasn't died yet, Night Watcher. Only shifted, slipping under the door like a hushed rumor. While it whistles through the headset of your device, do me a sailor's favor. Strike subscribe like you'd ring a ship's bell. Fling a like into the foam to keep our anchor free of algorithmic barnacles. And scribble down in the logbook below which nautical call sign you'd choose for your own covert vessel. Mine's coffee-stained kraken, stealthy but perpetually caffeinated. Good. Lanterns trimmed, fingers warmed. Let's nose our prow into the Cold War swell, where cartographers, admirals, and wide-eyed conspiracy nuts all tried to tame invisible monsters with circuits and classified ink. Picture the Baltic Sea in 1949. Slate water, stinging wind, iron sky. Swedish coastal defense crews huddle over brand new ASDIC sonar units, suspicious of Soviet subs rumored to test Swedish neutrality. One February night, the headset operator hears a rhythmic quack, yes, quack, beneath the static. It sounds like a drunk duck slapping metal pans. When the ping returns, no sub, no shoal, no ice flow, only endless darkness. Command logs label the anomaly Kvakare, the Quacker. Within months, Norwegian and Danish crews record identical noises. Naval cartographers, bound by secrecy, mark Baltic charts with cryptic icons, a stylized beaked blob encircled by sonar rings. An official monster tucked under top-secret covers. Across the invisible Iron Curtain, Soviet hydrophone analysts catalog the same duck code. They call it zich, onomatopoeia for rapid knocking. Some believe it's NATO's acoustic decoy. Others whisper of a biological leviathan stirred by depth charge tests. Neither side can admit ignorance, so both manufacture explanations. Swedish press eventually publishes sanitized mystery fish notices. The public, starved for wonder in a rationed decade, embraces the Baltic quacker like an adopted cryptid cousin of Loch Ness. Children sketch it in school margins, big-eyed, flippered, wearing a jaunty sailor cap. Meanwhile, in Washington, Office of Naval Research mathematicians translate quacker intervals into probability ellipses. Their plotting sheets, the dull gray heart of modern cartography, become speckled with cautious question marks. Monsters on printed maps may be passé, but on these hush-hush overlays, uncertainty still draws beasts, just recast as probability clouds. Let's swerve south to Bermuda, 1952. Project Seascan, a U.S. attempt to fingerprint every whale species by hydrophone, deploys floating microphones. Among blue whale moans and humpback songs emerges a wild, sub-50 Hz bellow incompatible with any cataloged mammal. Press releases omit it, yet technicians nickname the source King Hammerhead. Pulp magazine sees a leaked rumor slapping lurid covers of titanium-fanged sharks chomping sonar cables. Readers buy issues for the monsters. Inside, they also find ads for war bonds and vacuum tubes. Fear moves merchandise as reliably as spice. Jump a decade. July 1968, Soviet sub K-129 sinks northwest of Oahu. U.S. Navy SOUS arrays detect implosion acoustics. But along the same bearing, a secondary tremor appears, weirdly organic. Spec Ops cartographers annotate their salvage maps with a dotted biologic unknown. When the CIA's Project Azorian raises parts of the sub in '74, some engineers swear they glimpsed massive bite marks on a detached section. Unsubstantiated, but enough to fuel water cooler myth. The classified map's dotted unknown migrates into bar conversations, then into paperback thrillers, and, voila, an unofficial monster enters pop canon without ever scoring an engraved cameo. Across the Atlantic, British cartographic firms pivot from paper to microfilm. They test a new revenue idea: spectral overlays. Transparent sheets dotted with cryptids that buyers can lay atop Admiralty charts. Think decorative sea monster stickers for mariners missing medieval whimsy. One overlay set, Abyssal Adversaries, sells out in Portsmouth gift shops, despite the Ministry of Defense frowning. Proof that even radar-literate sailors relish a frisson of toothy decor. By the mid-1970s, consumer sonar gadgets trickle into sport fishing. Weekend captains on Scotland's Loch Ness rent handheld fish finders hoping to bag proof of Nessie. Graph paper spools from the devices like ticker tape, recording depth blips. Any stray school of salmon spawns rumors. Entrepreneurs print simplified lake maps annotated with star icons for most active monster zones. These commercial cryptid charts echo medieval bestiaries, except now the monsters boost local tourism revenue instead of saintly awe. Pause for a breath or a sip, whatever anchors you. If you're still aboard, tap Sonar Shiver in the comments and share the eeriest water sound you've ever heard. Creaking dock, foghorn, coffee percolator at 3 a.m. All data points feed future voyages. Shove off again. 1985, French atoll of Meroa. Greenpeace activists inflate a 20-meter rubber kraken alongside their protest ship Rainbow Warrior 2 while nuclear testing camera crews roll. The tentacled balloon dwarfs the patrol boats, visually framing France as Captain Ahab harpooning nature itself. The stunt dominates evening news, proving sea monsters still wield moral cudgels, now marshaled by environmentalists. Maps of the Pacific Test Zone, broadcast on TV, overlay radiation plumes atop stylized kraken arms. Public imaginations sponge it up. Letter-writing campaigns flood ministries. The beast, though hollow vinyl, changes policy conversation more than any spreadsheet. Technology leaps again. Early 90s, GPS satellites sharpen civilian navigation. Software giants license NOAA bathymetry, overlaying it on computer game worlds. Sid Meier's Pirates includes random Kraken events. The underlying coordinates mirror real Caribbean shoals. Players subconsciously memorize nautical charts disguised as entertainment. When they later spot actual maps, déjà vu hits. Fiction seeds geography. Around the same time, Japanese ROV dives record the first giant squid footage. Newspapers hail monster proven real, but deep-sea biologists deflate hyperbole. Squids avoid ships. They're ecological janitors, not kraken. Still, the press dusts off antique monster engravings for sidebars, giving 16th century cartographer Olaus Magnus a cameo in a 1990s science column. Renaissance fear hitchhikes on cable news hype. 2004, Google Earth beta leaks. Users zoom the oceans, dismayed by pixelated blues, bathymetry blurred for storage space. Internet forums fill the blanks with speculation. Rectangular artifact near Hawaii, obviously Atlantis. Long serpentine blur south of New Zealand, definitely a megalodon wake. Amateur monster hunters overlay their theories on exported KML files, circulate them as grassroots mythic charts. Crowdsourced cartography resurrects medieval practice. Annotate the unknown with imagination. Difference: distribution speed is now Wi-Fi, not parchment caravans. Let's slip north to the Baltic again. 2011. Swedish treasure hunters scanning old war relic sites spot a 60-meter circular anomaly on side-scan sonar. Tabloids proclaim Millennium Falcon under Baltic. Conspiracy blogs revive the Quacker legend, claiming the circle is the beast's nest. Clicks cascade. A commercial diving company sells limited edition anomaly charts for €29.95. Consumers hang them beside craft beer posters. Ironic decor, looping back to Hanseatic tavern swagger 5 centuries prior. Meanwhile, scientists analyzing the original sonar data note telltale scan line dropouts. Equipment glitch plus glacial deposit. No matter, the embellished map sells thousands. Accuracy bows again to enchantment economics. Mid-voyage stretch. Open porthole. Inhale pixel-free air. While you're at it, throw a squid emoji into chat if you've ever used Google Earth to hunt for anomalies. Helps the channel's algorithmic currents.
We sail onward to 2020, pandemic era. With borders closed, bored netizens track global cargo ships via AIS live maps, tiny arrow icons sliding across seas. When the Ever Given container ship wedges into the Suez Canal, someone notices its AIS path earlier that day resembles, well, male anatomy. Memes explode. Soon, pranksters pilot yachts spelling obscenities or doodling sea monsters visible on live maps. Those squiggles become ephemeral cartographic graffiti, modern serpents drawn not in ink but real-time GPS breadcrumbs. Authorities threaten fines. Pranksters live-stream bigger doodles. The map once terrified sailors, now sailors terrify the map. Yet even in jest, unease creeps. Deep learning anomaly detection systems used by insurers flag prank routes as suspicious risk clusters. Algorithms lack humor. They assign elevated hazard ratings to sectors doodled with dragons. Digital sea monsters accidentally resurrect maritime insurance surcharges. The serpent bites its own tail. Data puns feed economic ripples. Simultaneously, satellite altimetry reveals gravity-mapped undersea mountains. Each discovery plotted as gentle gray humps. But social media overlays colorized relief, exaggerating slopes into fang-like ridges. Narratives of tooth ranges flourish. Once again, a morphological metaphor transforms geology into bestiary. Let's pivot below the equator. Indonesian fishermen along the Straits of Malacca still refuse to trawl certain trenches, citing naga laut, sea dragons. They mark homemade charts with discrete curls, personal no-go zones passed father to son. When a European hydrocarbon firm commissions seismic surveys, they're baffled by local pushback. Corporate GIS experts overlay fish yield heat maps, see untapped riches. Villagers see taboo arteries. Negotiations stall until anthropologists explain. The serpents function as marine resource management. Taboo equals sustainable reserve. Western spreadsheets finally label the area Community Marine Exclusion, a bureaucratic echo of an ancient monster deterrent. Fear again serves ecological calculus. Clock check? Still awake? If eyelids droop, jot "mapmare" in comments before slumber claims you. Your interaction buoys this sleepy schooner. Back into circuitry. 2022 NOAA deploys machine learning to classify whale calls. The algorithm flags an unknown apex pattern in Mariana Trench audio. Reddit explodes. Bloop returns. NOAA downplays, yet their internal dashboard colors the trench red. For months, marine traffic planners reroute research vessels, not by mandate, but by superstition among captains who'd rather dodge PR nightmares. A digital red patch on a dashboard becomes the latest monster icon, albeit one only insider's view. Even invisible to public, monstrousness exerts logistical gravity. Artists sense fresh blood. Indie game Subnautica patches a new Leviathan loosely inspired by the Mariana anomaly. Streamers shriek in VR headsets. Fan wikis publish mock bathymetric charts laden with glowing eyes. Children memorize those fictional depths the way medieval choir boys once memorized Hereford Mappamundi demons. The cycle resets. Fear packaged, sold, and tattooed onto pop culture. But what about empirical cartography? Are monsters truly gone from serious nautical charts? Flip through the 2023 Admiralty Catalog. Page margins remain crisp, minimalist, no tentacles. Yet note the legend symbol, Obstin, undefined obstruction.
It hides beneath coordinates like a shy kraken. Obstructions could be rocks, wrecks, or sensor ghosts. Mariners treat them cautiously, plotting wider berths. Each obstin is a micro-monster, stripped of narrative but retaining behavioral power. Functional fear.
Our journey, though, isn't just about monsters. It's about the way uncertainty pools in maps' white spaces, then crystallizes into story. Whether etched by monk, lithographer, or algorithm, the human mind drapes dread over data gaps. Today, those gaps shrink but never vanish. Quantum computing may chart sub-millimeter waveforms, yet some glitch, some decibel hiccup will birth tomorrow's kraken.
Before we furl the sails, consider this. Satellites now photograph almost every square meter of ocean surface daily. Still, 80% of the seabed remains unmapped at high resolution. That's 8 Indias of abyss awaiting shapes. The next generation's monsters will likely be generated by AI, pattern recognition hallucinations in terabytes of sonar noise. Maybe a neural net will miscluster swarming squid clouds into one colossal entity and label it with a Latin name. When it does, I guarantee some influencer will print merch and some mariner will plot a detour, because tradition sails on. Copper wires instead of camel vellum. Deck lights shiver on the swell, friend, just bright enough to keep the horizon from swallowing us whole. Before we nose any deeper, lash that subscribe line to the mast, click the like button so hard it echoes across the foam, and scribble in the logbook below, what modern gadget would you trust to spot a sea monster? GoPro, drone, or trusty coffee mug sonar? Your answer keeps the algorithmic kraken well fed and our little vessel sailing free of the fog.
Right. Lantern steady. We promised a plunge into fiber optic trenches, Sotheby's auction rooms, and rocket barges that sketch accidental beasts across the Atlantic. Let's start with the cables, the invisible nerves of the internet, because nothing says 21st century monster lore like a YouTube outage blamed on sharks. June 2014. Google announces it's wrapping new trans-Pacific fiber optic lines in Kevlar because sharks keep biting them. The press runs wild. Cybershark versus Silicon Valley. Journalists hunt for images, but all they find is a shaky 2007 clip of a whaler shark gnawing a submarine cable during a maintenance dive. One snippet, 13 seconds of blurry curiosity, mutates into a global headline. Within hours, ClickFarm spit out infographic maps dotted with stylized shark icons chewing bright yellow lines from Los Angeles to Tokyo. Millions of eyeballs learn, incorrectly, that sharks crave electromagnetic signals. Marine biologists roll their eyes. Sharks mouth everything, including license plates. But myth beats nuance every time. Cloud service providers, sensing brand opportunity, release SharkSafe route maps showing backup paths rerouting around bite-prone trenches. In corporate boardrooms, fear of downtime morphs into fear of jaws. Insurance actuaries, those modern cartographers of risk, adjust premiums for cable-laying vessels operating in alleged hot zones. Just like that, a rumor from one pixelated video redraws the financial seascape. But the monster cartography spiral doesn't stop there. Weeks later, a viral TikTok trend asks creators to find the shark cables on Google Earth. People zoom onto seabed relief looking for linear artifacts, circle random ridges in neon highlighter, and declare them cable scars. Influencers overlay chump mark stickers, creating bright red danger belts. The digital scribbles become mini-maps shared millions of times, resurrecting the medieval tradition of communal monster annotation, only now crowdsourced in real time by teenagers in pajamas. Flip to our first field note. Technology multiplies map margins faster than accuracy can erase them. The unknown might be smaller than in 1450, but the appetite for dragons hasn't shrunk one scale. Let's coast to London, October 2019. Sotheby's galleries smell of polished oak and old money. Inside glass cases rest vellum monsters carefully lit by museum bulbs, the stars of the mythic Meridian auction. Lot 17 steals breaths, a 1639 Dutch nautical chart by Willem Janszoon Blauw. Margins packed with emerald serpents and ruby walrus dragons. The estimate tops £150,000. Why so high? Because a side note in the margin references Hafgufa, the sea mistaker, a leviathan said to mimic islands then swallow whole ships. In a flourish of narrative symmetry, the map's provenance includes a letter from a whaling captain who claimed his crew shot a harpoon into what they thought was a rock, only for the rock to submerge and shatter the boat. The story is unverifiable, but bidders don't pay for proof. They pay for delicious ambiguity. That night, the chart hammers at £312,000 to a tech billionaire rumored to hang it near his VR submarine simulator. Outside the auction room, the curator admits quietly, authenticity of the captain's letter is best case plausible, worst case inspired fiction. The monster margin multiplies its own value, a financial echo of medieval parchment, where the exotic sold the map as much as the coastline. Ready for a breath? While you inhale, tap Auction Kraken below if you'd raid your savings for a monster-laden artifact. Helps us gauge how many Kraken-curious souls crew this channel. All right, onward, but keep your life jackets cinched. We're boarding a drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, one of SpaceX's autonomous landing barges bobbing off the Florida coast. Each barge holds giant thrusters and GPS arrays that keep it centered within meter-level accuracy while a returning Falcon 9 booster whistles down from orbit. Now, boosters rarely land dead on. They swerve, adjust, spit flame, and sometimes miss. During testing in 2016, a rocket's fin collapsed milliseconds before touchdown, sending the 16-story tube cartwheeling across the deck. Cameras caught the mayhem. YouTube replays skyrocketed. Within a day, amateur flight path hobbyists plotted the drone ship's GPS logs. They noticed something whimsical. The thrust vector corrections the barge performed to dodge loose debris traced looping flourishes around its station point. 2 large curves, a smaller fin-like swirl, and a tapered tail. One commenter overlaid the path on satellite view and exclaimed, "It drew a freaking sea dragon!" The meme erupted. Space fans likened the barge to medieval cartographers, sketching monsters in the Atlantic with diesel thrusters. A subreddit emerged, r/boostbeasts, sharing time-lapse animations of future landings hunting for accidental creatures. NASA archivists, charmed, compared it to Apollo Earthshine doodles in lunar traverse logs. Even rocket science, the stiff upper lip of engineering, can't restrain humanity's need for dragons in the data. While SpaceX PR chuckled, maritime insurers again took note. They cross-checked barge drift patterns against shipping lanes, flagged collision risk zones, and, yes, updated digital charts with new exclusion advisories. Pilots download these updates to their EC-DIS terminals, viewing zigzag polygons colored hazard red.
They don't appear as dragons, but the shape derived from a rocket-drawn beast becomes a literal barrier in real-world navigation. Myth seeds policy. Let's heave across the Pacific to Tonga, January 2022, when the Hunga Tonga Hunga Hapai volcano cleaved itself apart. The eruption unleashed a pressure wave that circled Earth 4 times and a tsunami that severed the sole fiber cable tethering Tonga to the internet. For weeks, the island nation sat in near-digital darkness. When patch crews arrived, ROV cameras revealed the cable draped like spaghetti over fresh volcanic turrets. A dislodged section curled in a silhouette uncannily resembling a dragon's spine. Local artists wasted no time. They painted the Tonga spine serpent on murals, turning disaster into legend, legend into tourism hope. New stamps depict a friendly red serpent cradling a Wi-Fi icon. In school notebooks, kids sketch a cable dragon who brings the internet fish. Map makers at Tonga's hydrographic office half joke about adding a serpent watermark near the eruption coordinates, a tongue-in-cheek homage to medieval practice. As of this recording, the proposal awaits cabinet approval. Should it pass, the first state-sanctioned monster in centuries will swim on an official nautical chart. Pause again. Stretch your shoulders. If the serpent stamp tickles your imagination, drop a wave dragon emoji below. Engagement ho! Next waypoint, the Arctic, where climate change melts charts faster than archivists can update them. New shipping routes thread the ice, but navigation satellites struggle near the poles. In 2025, a Norwegian startup launches an AI-enhanced radar buoy network. Early trials reveal ghost echoes, long serpentine reflections with no physical cause, likely from atmospheric ducting. The marketing team seizes the glitch, branding the network Kraken Shield. Can't beat 'em, monetize 'em. Their glossy promo map displays crimson tentacles draped over shipping routes, each marking zones monitored for signal anomalies. Investors love the brand story. The company doubles valuation. Mariners? They nicknamed the buoys electric eels, half annoyed, half reassured. Someone's at least watching. Which pivots us to an uncomfortable thesis. As uncertainty shrinks, manufactured myth balloons to fill the marketing vacuum. Medieval monks feared God's unknown oceans. We fear server downtime and climate collapse. The monsters evolve, but the hunger stays. Case study. 2023's viral AI image of a deep-sea angler colossus supposedly caught on a lost Soviet negative. Midjourney rendered it. Toothy, luminescent, plausible enough that news sites ran with it before experts cried foul. The AI watermark had been cleverly erased. Yet the fake photograph's coordinate tag, 42 degrees N, 145 E, sent hordes of Googlers to find the beast's birthplace. Meme map accounts plotted sightings, layering them onto OpenStreetMap tiles with Gothic fonts. Weeks later, a Japanese trawler misreported a malfunctioning dredge and inadvertently confirmed a massive unknown catch. That was enough. Legend crystallized. Today, Etsy sells Angler Colossus navigation charts aged with tea stains. Sailors pin them on cabin walls beside real Z-plates. Modern myth piggybacks on AI's convincingly crunchy pixels. Let's transition below decks, history library time. Did you know that in 1873, when the HMS Challenger conducted the first global oceanographic cruise, its officers debated placing cryptid symbols on their draft bathymetry sheets? The official logs omit them, but a midshipman's diary surfaced in 2011 auction notes showing little inked kraken near deep soundings where sounding lines suddenly jerked. The Admiralty struck the sketches before publication. Yet the private doodles influenced at least one popular version sold to the public in 1880, where a tiny tentacle motif decorates the title cartouche. Monsters suppressed by science still leaked through ornamentation. Victorian engravers couldn't resist tradition. Fast forward, April 2021, UK Hydrographic Office releases an interactive Seabed 2030 portal. Within gaze, users combing the map discover decorative Easter eggs, mermaids at data gap nodes drawn by a bored developer. Reddit applauds. The Office issues PR spin, a nod to cartographic heritage. No reprimands. The monsters stay, albeit invisible until clicked. Digital cartography now hides serpents in code rather than ink. You need curiosity as compass to uncover them. Same skill medieval pilgrims used to decode margin beasts into moral lessons. Take a sip. Tea, coffee, or brackish bilge, your choice. Then tell me in comments, have you ever found an Easter egg in software? Tag it, #MonsterBug. Algorithms love when we trade bug tales. We can't depart without revisiting the Cold War quacker anomaly we opened earlier. After decades of speculation, a 2012 declassified Swedish report revealed the source. Oscillating valves in Soviet sub-refrigerant systems produced a distinctive quack under certain Baltic salinity layers. Mystery solved? Sort of. The public hardly noticed the report. By then, Netflix's hit series Baltic Abyss had immortalized a tentacled quacker devouring submarines. Tour companies in Stockholm offered Duck of Doom harbor cruises, complete with sonar pings pumped over loudspeakers. The monster outlived its debunking, shrugged, and booked a gig. Even governments can't resist. In 2024, Estonia's Ministry of Tourism launched a holographic installation on Tallinn's waterfront. Visitors point phones at the sea. AR renders a translucent Quaker cresting waves. They sell nautical charts in the gift shop, Quaker silhouette embossed next to the North Arrow. A once secret sonar glitch evolves into state-sponsored spectacle, and yes, boosts winter tourism numbers by 18%. Circle back to maps themselves. Paper charts are being sunsetted. By 2026, most navies will rely exclusively on electronic navigation. Does that mean the age of drawn monsters truly ends? Not if game modders, data viz artists, and glitch poets have any say. Already, indie programmers overlay procedural leviathans onto open-source bathymetry, visible only when zoomed past 600%. Digital watermarks akin to map makers signing their work. If a future AI ever scrapes those data sets for training, who knows? Maybe it will treat the Leviathan as a real terrain feature, instructing autonomous shipping routes to swerve. One artist's whim could distort machine perception, an act of cartographic hauntology. We have sketched a panorama, sharks that cost Google millions, Sotheby's charts conjuring 300K pounds at a gavel's tap, drone ships doodling sea dragons, volcanic cable beasts, AI hoaxes, Victorian doodles, AR tourism, and digital Easter egg leviathans. Through it all, one current threads, an unbroken line from medieval monks to modern meme makers. Where data grows thin, imagination fattens. And every time, a map records the bulge, sometimes visibly, sometimes in metadata, always in human behavior. Ease into the low-light glow of your screen, traveler, and pull that blanket a little tighter around your shoulders.
Before we submerge for the grand finale, hit subscribe like you're slamming the great brass diving bell hatch. Flick a thumbs up so the algorithmic tide keeps us afloat. And tell the comments which mythical sea beast deserves its own emoji. Bonus points if you invent one. Your clicks and keystrokes are the bioluminescent plankton that light this channel's wake, and I'm grateful for every spark.
Now, goggles down, ears popping, follow me into the deepest, darkest rift on the modern map. The trench where science, patents, and pure, unfiltered wonder swirl together like plankton in a riptide. Our destination begins with paperwork of all things. In 2028, the U.S. Patent Office quietly granted document 10977-221B, genetic sequences derived from Archithethus ducks for biomedical use. Giant squid DNA trademarked. The filing didn't name the squid outright. Instead, it referred to pelagic cephalopod species exceeding 15 meters. Nerds parsed the Latin in an afternoon, and Twitter erupted. Within hours, meme cartographers took standard bathymetry layers, slapped red TM symbols over every trench rumored to shelter a kraken, and reposted them under hashtags #CopyrightKraken and #PatentPoseidon. Overnight, the old "Here Be Monsters" flourish morphed into "Here Be Intellectual Property." That legal land grab wasn't unique. A Swiss biotech startup holds exclusive rights to an antifreeze protein tweaked from Antarctic icefish. Their stock prospectus features a polar projection map in which the Southern Ocean is peppered with elegant snowflake icons. Investors thought it cute. Critics noticed each snowflake sat neatly atop uncharted shelf edges, exactly where 19th century polar charts once penciled white sea demons. The monsters, erased by sonar, have been replaced by monoculture logos. But look closely at the footnotes. Sampling locations approximated, precise coordinates proprietary. There, in small print, the monster returns. Mystery restored by non-disclosure clause. Ready to descend another pressure level? Strap in, because we're hitching a ride on Calypso V, a privately owned bathyscaphe the length of a London bus, bought by a space mining billionaire who got bored waiting for Mars. He's hired cartographers, mythologists, even a poet laureate in residence to re-enchant his sonar mosaics. The Hull projector paints living AR murals against the viewport glass. Sea serpents glide alongside real amphipods. Kraken eyes wink when LiDAR hits unexpected voids. And every sonar anomaly triggers a short haiku composed algorithmically in the style of Basho. Investors call it experiential data visualization. I call it the most expensive illuminated manuscript afloat. On their maiden dive into the Diamantina fracture zone, Calypso's crew mapped a 26-kilometer scar they swear resembles Leviathan in mid-coil. The billionaire tweeted the contour lines as proof we were always meant to read the sea like scripture. His 20 million followers retweeted, annotated, colored, and within a day the shape had a name, the Infinite Spine. A new digital pilgrimage began. VR explorers trekking the Leviathan Ridge in headset lounges, swapping coordinates like medieval pilgrims traded relic dust. Pause to breathe. While you adjust to surface pressure, tap the bell icon if you'd pay for a submersible ticket. Comment Deep Seeker if you'd rather stay topside sipping cocoa. Either way, your engagement keeps the ballast balanced. Back we go, deeper.
Autonomous cargo fleets now thread the Arctic each summer. Their route planning AIs ingest petabytes of hydrographic charts, real-time weather, and, unintentionally, spirals of user-generated sea monster data scraped from social media. One programmer left the filter thresholds loose. Then an overnight run spat out a brand new hazard polygon shaped like a many-limbed jellyfish writhing across the shipping lanes. The algorithm had simply averaged overlapping posts tagged #SeaGhost, #IceWorm, and #FogShadow. When the engineers tried deleting the shape, the Path Optimizer's risk scores skyrocketed. The AI had internalized collective dread as navigational fact.
So the company, the same one delivering your flash sale headphones, left the phantom jellyfish in the database, reclassified as probability cloud for low visibility ice hazards. Official charts gained an unmarked gray blob near Greenland, visible only to the fleet's bridge displays. Thus, a crowdsourced myth acquired corporate citizenship, quietly steering million-dollar vessels around imaginary tentacles. Let's swivel the periscope to academia. In 2030, the University of Lisbon hosted the first Cartomythopoesis Symposium. Scholars, sailors, and VR streamers packed a lecture hall shaped like a nautilus shell. Keynote topic: Does perfect ocean knowledge kill wonder? A marine data scientist argued yes. Once every seamount, eddy, and migratory path is modeled to the centimeter, the sea becomes a spreadsheet, not a mystery. A philosopher countered, humanity will simply pivot. Monsters will migrate to quantum diagrams or dark matter maps. The crowd, phones raised, live polled themselves. Result: 82% believed mysteries will survive. 10% voted Spreadsheet C, and 8% cheekily selected Release the Spreadsheet Kraken. Within minutes, some attendee minted the poll as an NFT, overlaying a medieval Mappamundi. It sold for 5 Ethereum. Wonder monetized at light speed. While that dispute raged, naval architects across the street were prototyping neuroadaptive helm chairs that pulse binaural beats based on sonar return complexity. The deeper and stranger the data, the wilder the audio. Early testers reported hallucinating singing serpents at 6,000 meters. Engineers saw spurious feedback. Art historians smelled a revival of siren myth. The Navy quietly funded more research, not to ban the hallucinations, but to weaponize them as cognitive alerts. If a sonar tech feels a serpent, odds are the contact matters. Myth as ergonomic interface. Grab a sip of hydration, maybe saltwater taffy tea, and drop a octopus graph emoji if you think spreadsheets deserve tentacles. We can't close this odyssey without resurfacing where it all started, the question of map margins and fear. Medieval cartographers drew monsters because they lacked sonar, satellites, and consensus. Today we have all three, yet the monsters thrive. Only now they lurk in patent filings, algorithm weightings, and AR overlays. They mark places where our intellect bumps into economic ambition, where data dithers into glitch, where our lizard brain whispers, something vast still stirs. Consider the most recent UN seabed treaty debates. Environmental NGOs lobbied to label vulnerable ecosystems with red coral icons. Mining consortia pushed blue pickaxes. A youth coalition counter-proposed mythic beasts. Kraken for zones at risk of deep-sea trawling, mermaids for fragile sponge fields. They argued that monstrous symbolism would wake public imagination faster than abstract icons. The plenary laughed until a viral visualization replaced the negotiating chamber's wall map with animated creatures. Twitter exploded, and within 48 hours, the Secretariat agreed to add a cultural layer option to future GIS releases. Policy by Sea Monster? 1. Bureaucratic inertia? 0.
Let's haul one final artifact from the hold, the Black Fathom Codex, an open-source database launched just last year. It invites anyone with GPS and a smartphone to log encounters with the unmapped. Could be an uncharted sandbar, a sonar hiccup, or a whale call too deep to trace. Each submission spawns a stylized beast generated by a neural net trained on 30,000 historical map monsters. Sailors love it. Shipping firms hate it. Insurance underwriters can't decide which columns to ignore. Yet the codex grows, pixel by pixel, myth by myth. Proof that collective curiosity still charts its own archipelago. Now, surface time. Our tanks hiss, deck plates clang, and dawn pinks the horizon. We've sailed from monks painting dragons on vellum to AI doodling phantoms in gigabytes. From chart margins to algorithm cores, from fear to profit to play and back again. The monsters never left, they merely changed medium. If tonight's voyage stirred your sense of wide-eyed doubt, smash that like button till it echoes like a foghorn. Hoist subscribe so you'll catch our next sleepy saga and anchor your thoughts in the comments. What modern frontier needs a new sea monster? And what would you name it? I read every entry while the coffee percolates at 2 a.m. and your words steer future expeditions. Until our next midnight sail, keep mapping, keep questioning, and remember, the safest charts are often the most dishonest. Because a blank margin means someone decided not to dream there. Let's keep the margins messy. Good night, and may your data streams always glimmer with just enough mystery to make the voyage worth taking.